Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's program and webinar presented by ACP, the Association of Continuity Professionals. I'm Jim Brennan, sitting in for Dr. Ed Goldberg. It is my pleasure to host today's webinar. It's Presenting to the Board, How to Be a Highly Successful Presenter. And we'll begin after our usual quick reminders. Today's webinar and all of our previous webinars are recorded and made available to ACP members on the ACP website. And if you have an idea for a webinar topic, we ask you to please send it to staff@acp-international.com. Our guest speaker will be taking questions at the end of today's presentation, so please post your questions during the webinar in the question box in your control panel. You can do that anytime throughout the presentation. We'll get you a response to any questions that we are not able to answer here today. As I mentioned, our webinar is Presenting to the Board, How to Be a Highly Successful Presenter. When business continuity has a chance to present to senior management, you need to be prepared to seize the day. And today you will see how to use your understanding of the audience to build and deliver a story that will make sure your key messages are heard and understood. It will keep your audience truly engaged and elevate the BCM program and your team members. Our presenter is Christopher Duffy, the Vice President of Professional Services at Strategic BCP. Chris is an industry award-winning consultant and certified information systems security professional who possesses more than 25 years experience in IT management, disaster recovery, business impact analysis, and risk mitigation. Chris also possesses extensive experience in vendor management, data center management, and acquisition integration. He's a frequent blogger, speaker, and author who's received multiple awards in leadership and innovative IT. Chris currently leads Strategic BCP's Professional Services Division, which provides new ways for customers to mitigate risk, build agile, resilient plans, all while ensuring compliance with industry guidelines and federal regulations. And we are very pleased to welcome Christopher Duffy. Good afternoon, Chris.
Afternoon, and thank you, Jim, and thank you all for attending. So the impetus for this presentation actually came from experience. Recently, and for this career, I've been presenting on behalf of our sponsors, either up front or after an engagement, to their senior leaders and their board. And lately, it's been a lot about cybersecurity and integration with business continuity, plans, or actually actionable results. And you yourselves have probably been in presentations and felt like what's actually on this image. And presenting itself, standing up in front of an audience. So if we look at the top 10, it sits right there at number 2. So understandable. Now take that fear of public speaking and put it in front of your boss or your boss's boss, and it gets a little stressful. So I want to make a point. During this presentation, I'm actually going to play 2 different roles. My first role, as I'm doing now, is as the presenter. I will step aside in a dual personality role and talk about the presentation itself. So I'm going to be playing that balancing act as we go. So what you normally see in a good presentation is usually there's a start. And I love this one especially. Why? If you're in an audience and you are doing or watching a presentation, look around. How fast do people pick up the phone or flip open the laptop? You've got 30 seconds. That impact of what you're going to do has to have a captured audience attention. Otherwise, it becomes a lot more difficult. So in doing that, in building that, it relates to the human brain. On one side of the brain, it's our feelings, right? It's that creativity. It's the thinking side. But on the other side, it's the analytical side. And if we're going to do an effective presentation, it's got to cover both sides of that. And that presentation, the best way to get it across is to tell a story. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's take a look at what we're doing. We're going to find out, understand who our audience is, why they're there, go through that process. What's the message? What's the takeaway we're going to give them? And how do we build that story for them? Talk about some of the delivery tips and making sure that we're successful and that your presentation is heard and they leave with it. I even have references. I'll cover them as well. So let's start with our audience. I call it the 4 W's. Who are they? Who's sitting there? Who's sitting in my audience now? What do they know about the subject that I'm going to be speaking on? Whether that be at an industry conference or my board, I really want to get a good sense because I've got to build that story and content to them. Why are they there? Again, is it there because you've been required to show up or you have findings? What's that core? And more importantly, what do we want them to lead with? You go to a presentation, what is it? Is it a learning one? Is it an aha moment? Is it an ask? Usually with boards and senior leadership, I find it's an ask. I need money to fund this or mitigate these risks. So let's take a delve into the 2 key audiences that we're going to be looking at. First one is the board. So now I'm going to step back. What you'll notice is my background. I use a lot of imagery. I make it strong. It supports exactly what I'm going to be talking about, but it doesn't overshadow. It's about the content. So I'm using complementary imagery as I go through this, sometimes to make a point or otherwise support it. Back to our regular schedule. So who are they? Your board comes from all over, and the larger your organization, the bigger the people. They're going to be chief information, security, CEOs of both current and retired positions. Let's make some assumptions of what they know. They're going to have a very little knowledge of business continuity. I've got to make that assumption, and we'll talk through that as well. That's not their key. Even from a CIO and as a former CIO, you don't have that depth. And honestly, you're a stranger. Right? You're coming in usually through senior leadership. They probably don't know you, especially if it's your first presentation. And this is real important, so I'm going to talk about this. They have a sanitized view. As a former senior leader, what our board knew about our organization was what we presented to them. So when you're doing and developing a presentation, it's probably going to go through about 400 to 500 iterations because everybody wants to make sure that that message is clean and correct. Again, now let's look at senior leadership. You notice the image. Image shows that, supports what I presented. So right, obviously, Captain Obvious, it's the current C's. FO, IO, SO, EO. Alphabet soup. But again, those are the people that are going to be sitting in that boardroom that we're going to be talking to. I'm going to make some assumptions that they have some passing knowledge, whether you've done it, predecessor or previous organizations, or as they've grown through a organization, the chances are they know that there's things such as plans and disaster recovery. So they'll have that passing knowledge. And the nice thing is, hey, they may even know you, depending if it's your boss's boss, or your boss's boss's boss. They may know you. Having a relationship or a knowledge of that person will help. And honestly, they've got a very or more realistic view than the board. Because again, as things go up, they do get filtered. And that really is important to the perspective that we're going to have with them. So when we look at perspective, let's look at it from a board view. Business continuity. What they know is probably from an internal or an external audit of the company that they've dealt with, the report of findings that come out. That's going to be their knowledge. Or if somebody like you or I have stood in front of them in their own organization and dealt with it. This is big. This is it. Current news. In the news is how are we reacting? So they're going to take that to senior leaders and say, so how are you handling the ash fallout? Or How are we handling the data breach that's occurring? What is our stance and what are you doing to fix it? So that drives a lot of the board down to senior leadership and then down to us. Hey, their own staff may have been involved in a presentation internally as senior leaders. So we really want to know, okay, I've got this much knowledge. Again, passing. Our senior leaders, though, a little different. Again, notice very similar to the board, because your senior leaders may be board members elsewhere. It's their internal findings, their audit, their chief risk officers coming and saying, hey, we've got to mitigate these issues. Usually comes from top down. Board asks, then senior leaders ask those directors, vice presidents, and it falls down. And that's where we come in. I love this one. I have to tell you that I got a little story here for you. Self-awareness. This is probably where you'll see the most success in your organization. Is we know there's an issue. We want to fix this. What do we need to do? It really resounds. It starts at the top down. That's that governance that's so effective in business continuity success. Is that board has that, or that senior leadership has that self-awareness. Now, let's take the positive and just put some caveats out there. Any questions are usually going to be politically motivated. And let me explain why or how, having been through the receiving end of those questions. So first, I'm the smartest guy in the room. I need to ask this question because I already know the answer. But remember, we're the subject matter expert. When that happens, and it's usually at a board level, I will look to the senior leader. We've probably rehearsed this, so I've already covered this. As an outside consultant, it's a lot easier. You can always tell me to leave. But here's the big one. Not only am I smarter than you, meaning them in the audience, the back and forth is, there usually is posturing. That person wants to be the next CEO, and so when the board does their nominations, that comes around as, hey, this guy's really, really smart, or this gal's really, really smart, we should make them the CEO. So how do I fix this? All right. Normally at this point I would have played the video, but audio sound does not play well. So I've actually, you can have this deck. My email's at the end of this, but the link is there and it's also at the bottom. This is a 2-minute and 40-second video. Remember I said start impactful, have that imagery? I'm using video. This video is about identical twins in an elevator. One's prepared and one's not. And it covers all aspects of why you need a plan, how to prepare for disasters, what you should be doing in disasters. And the imagery in the background changes. But what it does is, this is real important, it educates the board, because those people or senior leaders may be afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid to their peers. It also sets a baseline. Remember, we don't know what they don't know. This kind of raises it up. I also recommend it's a great use if you're doing business continuity training as part of your life cycle. It's a great video. I suggest you download it because we are in business continuity and playing it off the web can be risky. So I usually embed this in the PowerPoint when I do my PowerPoint presentation. But again, very highly effective. It even has the Department of Homeland Security, and it talks essentially about active shooter at the end, and it opens the questions, which is a beautiful, beautiful introduction to your presentation. So speaking of presentations, this is an actual photo off my phone. What's the message? What is my takeaway from this slide? Otherwise, my eyes are bleeding. What I find is even more ironic, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it's from the Marketing and Communication School of Journalism. It's overwhelming. If you're going to start or tell that story, have an impact. I'll give you a great example. Let's stay with cybersecurity, right? Ransomware is a great one. Okay, I'm going to start talking about it. So when we look at threats to our organization and I start going through this slide, where's your eye? Are you listening to me? No, you're trying to figure this slide out. And it's not personal, it doesn't impact you. Most of the presentations that I do, I will use very visual and strong imagery because it becomes the point to tell the story. So instead of this, to talk about it, I say, okay, this has just hit our company. This is on everybody's desktops right now. What are we going to do? Pauses are great, by the way. Gives us a chance to capture our thoughts, use the emphasis, and lead on into the next slide. So now I can tell my story of what we're going to do and how we're going to do that. But this is relatable. This is new. This is current. I actually use this for our tabletop exercises that we actually have it animated, so they see it going. But let's look at that story. Let's talk about building the story itself. So the story, where do we start? It's hard. It's overwhelming. So start with an outline, whether it be Word or the PowerPoint outline way. Just create the outline. And then I was called right brain. I keep looking at it. I talk it. I socialize that outline. Got it. Okay. From there, and this works really well, create the title for the slide. Now that I've got the outline, because I missed this one. Let me go back and put one in there. Creating the titles creates that flow, that organic way. Again, I'm speaking and it's flowing. We want the same thing. By doing that, by having the title. And if you've noticed, I don't have a lot of titles. Sometimes I just have the content or the images. But again, this is exactly how you start. Now that I've got it, find the images to support it. You look at this, the title says building a story, and I've got a storybook open, and we're building that story. That supporting image is exactly what's needed for this slide. Now, lean content, I'll talk a little bit later on about how lean it should be. Remember, less is more. We want to put it in, it's got to support the image and the outline and that title. So now we're building up from down. Where we go? I need to test it. Right? Go through that walkthrough. Socialize it internally with your team, with your boss at this point, because what you're going to do is always go back and refine it. In all honesty, when I do a presentation at a conference or for a client, I'm usually refining it the day of or that morning. In fact, this presentation here, Pinky, an hour ago, we were changing images. Because I didn't feel that it worked. And I was doing just that. I was refining it, defining it, and then delivering it. So let's take a look at some of those deliveries, those tips that we can help make you have that confidence and that success in front of that audience. And see that? You immediately went, you looked at the image and went right to the top. Because again, I want to support that. So first of all, and you could probably, if this was live, this would be a chuckle, is you don't read your slides, which I just did. Because people read faster than you talk, no matter how fast you talk. So I can't focus on two different things. They call it PowerPoint. Too often you go to a presentation and it's not even a power read. So we don't want that. Use it as a talking point, and that's that refine on the previous slide. We want to refine it. We want to get it down so the message is there with that takeaway. This is really, really hard to do. At conferences, my presentations will say, here's the outline. I don't hand my presentations out in advance, obviously, because I fixed them up until that point. But why go? That's the point, right? If you're coming to hear this content, come hear the content. Don't ever, ever use somebody else's deck, because it's not your own. You need to know those materials, and you need to know them well. I don't say memorize them. I think that's really hard because it locks you into it, and you're not able to read the audience, and you might make changes. My last presentation at a secure conference, on my flight over, I was reading, and that Facebook, 3.1 million people affected. I put that right into my slide, and I changed it right then and there. So I use a mirror, right? It sounds kind of funny, but until you're comfortable, take a look at it. Have somebody, friends, family, record it. Use your phone. We're our own worst critic, so let's use that. Where can I refine that? Watch the presentation. Listen to it. Let me see how I am presenting. Big one here. Remember, people read faster than we talk. I want to talk to the point, but not read it. So now I'm controlling the audience and how we're going through. So this building of those slides really let me do just that. So another delivery tip. You've done the refinement, you've done the testing, you know how long it takes. Big point here. Just because you have an hour, which maybe you don't, but just because you have that time frame, don't fill it. If you've got a lot of slides, you might want to speak a little better at a faster pace, or talk at a normal pace because I have enough slides and I know the time that it's going to take to do it. And I'm not saying being an auctioneer, you've got too many slides if you're trying to cram them in. I did a previous presentation on lizard brain, and that was almost 60 slides. I was done in 40 minutes at talking at a pace like this. Why? Because while there were more slides, they were very graphic, and they were just up for a second to explain the topic. You've heard me. As I've been presenting, I've speeded up. I've lowered my voice. I've used pauses for emphasis, and do that. You've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Right? That's the example of what not to do. The earth revolves around the sun. Somebody who doesn't moderate their pitch and speed. I do this. It's a very effective technique. I follow this craft about presentations very closely, and the award winner, he did a presentation on why he is the world's greatest speaker, and it's a psychological thing. Opening up the hand to your audience shows vulnerability and builds trust. So by doing this, it really engages that audience even further. And again, overdress. You are the subject matter expert. You should come across that way. Now, I know this may be a little difficult, so I'm going to point it out to you. It's a trick I've used for years in doing my slides, is how do I transition verbally? How do I blend seamlessly from one slide to the other? So I don't know if you can see this or not, but down in the lower left corner, I made it even darker than I would normally. It has my transition word. So now I'll use it. Coming back, playing that dual role. So now that we've got some good delivery tips, let's talk a little bit more about making them effective. And one of the ways I like to make things effective, again, how do you know your audience who you may not have direct contact with? Is LinkedIn. Is go look at them. Because one of the things, and I'll point it out again, is having that relationship or having something to talk about before or after the presentation really helps. So learning the board, hey, I just see you guys bought Heartland Securities. That was really neat. How's that going? Wow. Up front, before, or afterwards. What do we want them to leave with? It's the content, it's the message, it's the ask from the story. Key point here, and actually a red flag. You're going to start late, especially a senior leader or board, and you're finishing on, quote, time that you were supposed to, or maybe early because they're now running behind. I was out in Carlsbad, California in the boardroom to do a presentation that started at 8 o'clock, and I went on at 8 o'clock. I was there at 7, making sure the AV and all that was working. Great view of the Pacific Ocean. I was like, this is awesome. I didn't get started until 8:23. I was in the room, they're getting their coffee and stuff, and they're chatting around, and they're waiting for everybody else, and their CEO was late. I knew, and again, I had built my presentation so that I could talk slower or faster to get that material across. Now, I did say a red flag. Look, I got mad PowerPoint skills. I could do cool things with it. This is not the time, I don't know where it is, to do that. Keep it clean and concise. Use a single font. And do a simple build. You can see I'm using a peer. Once in a while with my arrows, I'll use them for emphasis, but I'm using that simple build. Remember, direct and guide the audience through your presentation because they'll read ahead otherwise. Again, mad PowerPoint skills. We see the rainbows or the dissolves or their spins. It's a problem. People will start to count them and lose the presentation. It's no different. And when I used to start out, and again, this is a very common presentation skill. How do you fill the silence? Well, people are uncomfortable who present with that. You need to have that comfort. Because people will start to count the ums and the you knows. And that overpowers that presentation. That's a skill that you need to learn it, and that comes out when you do your rehearsals. Here's a great one. I'm talking about animation bullets. Everybody uses them. And when I actually presented this at the National ACP, and Charlene did a presentation after me and actually made reference to the fact that she's not taking them out. You don't have to, but it's clean. It cleans that up. It gives you more room for larger fonts. Now, Guy Kawasaki, he's a great presenter. He's a futurist, technologist. I follow him. He has a 10-20-30 rule. And again, it's a rule. I use it as a guide. 10 slides, 20-point font, 30 minutes. It's a guide. Remember, we want to build lean content. So in building that lean content, this is a good way to do it. So what we've done, we've looked at building the story. We know who the audience is. So you guys are ready? I'm going to turn the camera around. Whew. It's nervous. Right? Big audience. Sometimes there's cameras. And there's that podium in front of me. So now, let's get up front. Let's get in front of that. First of all, don't use the podium. Psychologically, it is a support mechanism. It puts me protected from my audience. You want to come around from the podium. We'll tell you, don't touch the podium, even for emphasis. It's for presidents. College graduations, absolutely. State of the Union speeches, absolutely. For us, we're here to present a material. I need you to get there. Get there early. Why? I need to have anchors. Now, who's an anchor? It's somebody in the audience or people in the audience where I have established a rapport. We've talked about it. Hey, how's that coffee? Or, hey, you came in from Dubuque, Iowa? Wow. Why? Because as I'm presenting, I now have that. I can establish eye contact with those. Don't lock into just one person. You're going to look over the audience, establish that eye contact. It shows confidence. And having those anchors are really good because what do they think they're going to do when you look at them? They're going to smile. and I need them. That's going to make me feel good I'm on target. Because reading the audience is going to be very effective. Remember that slide, you got 30 seconds? You can tell how well you're doing, except the Asia Pacific Rim, because they never, ever look at the presenter. They close their eyes or they're on their laptops. But I get to see that eye contact, so I can gauge how well am I doing. Do I need to raise my voice up a little bit to get that attention, or can I keep it where I'm at? Really, really important. Reading the audience, getting those anchors, and that eye contact. So the next one, engaging the audience. Know up front, are you going to take questions during it? Now, during a board meeting, you usually don't have a choice. Why we use the video up front. But you need to make that determination. It is a skill, how to facilitate questions for people that are just like your board that want to show that the audience that they know more. So how do you effectively defer that? Hey, that's a great question. We'll talk about that later because right now it kind of doesn't relate to what I need to do. So thank you. Just asked them a question and gave them the answer, and I was able to move on. That's hard. And it's a very difficult one to do, especially in the leadership of board meetings. So you want to ask those questions. Will they be asking questions, or am I just doing the presentation and waiting to afterward? Jim did a great job, and unfortunately on the WebEx, you can't have that interaction. So we're going to do it at the end. But again, having that set up front makes a big difference. Pause for effect. I'm going to jump out of my role. So again, lower corner of the screen tells me what my next slide transition is. And it's difficult because usually your back is to your screen, so you want to put it there. So in this case, I'd be standing on this side, and I'd be able to look to the right and pick it up. Nobody has ever noticed it. Because again, we're keeping them focused on that big 24 to 30 point font and the images and the content. But it's just subtle. So let's talk about it. Now we're up front, right? No fear. Now I'm going to tell you why you're going to be successful. Well, if you've seen American Idol, you've been in a presentation, the audience wants you to succeed. They're cheering for you early on. Sometimes it gets to a point where it's the law of diminishing returns, but they do. They want you to succeed. Here's another caveat. Tell the audience, if you're nervous and you're comfortable in that, or hey, this is my first time, boy, they're going to be behind you and be a lot more forgiving. Honesty helps. Remember that open hand? That's it. Hey, I'm a little nervous here. This is my first time, or wow, I've never presented to such a big audience. This is cool. Know you're prepared. You know your material. It's yours. You built it. You wrote it. You are ready. You're going to focus on the presentation. Oh, I'm so nervous. Yeah, that's natural. There's always intrepidation and a little nerves in getting there. That's what makes it good. But you're going to focus on your material. That gets you there. They say redirecting nervous energy. That's where you're going to do it. You're going to focus on that. Hey, good opener. Right? My favorite opener, thank you for coming. I'm excited to be here. Some cases I'll bring it in. So, hey, thanks for the introduction. I was on my way here and I'm telling a relevant story as I did with that. I saw on the news this boom, 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 and then I blended that into my presentation. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you're good at your job. You're there for a reason. Let that passion, knowledge, and energy come through. Man, redirect it. You will be successful in that. And remember, that audience, right, they're there for a couple of different reasons or a single focus. I need to hear what we're doing or what we're doing as a company for this. Or what are the stats? Show me some dashboards on what's our progress or where does the money need to go. They're there for a reason. And probably the most important, if you see us with humor, is that you've made it through this entire presentation. So I want to talk about references here. So Guy Kawasaki, he's got that 10-20-30 rule, and then what those 10 slides are. So it's really good. Seth Godin creates a great book. He's got an article, it's like a page on bad PowerPoint. If you haven't already seen TED Talks, their 10 tips or the 5 to watch, or my favorite is the Death by PowerPoint. And these are some of the stuff I brought in here, the brain rules about building that effective presentation. Even the Department of Homeland Security is a great resource to use in doing that education. And there are a lot of blogs and other things out there on improving presentation skills. I like Larry's, it's pretty concise as well. So at this point, I want to thank you very much. I'd like to tie in what I start with what I end. So in my closing remarks, you don't need Death by PowerPoint. You have the tools, you have the knowledge. It's a matter of refining them, building them, and effectively using them. So thank you. Jim, I'd like to open it up for questions if there are any.
Yes, certainly, and thank you so much, Chris. Very informative and certainly very useful. And we encourage, obviously, people to make the best use of what you had to offer here today. A number of people have asked if the slides would be available, and they will be. You see Chris's email right there, and if you drop him a line, he will email you the PDF.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yeah,
all right.
All you're going to get is the deck, nothing else. I'm not in sales.
All right, so a couple of the other questions. How do you cover all of your points without reading the slide? And it adds parenthetically, I agree you should not read directly from the slide, but how do you remember all the things you want to communicate during the slide?
That's a great question. That's awesome, actually. So thank you. So one of the things I'll do is, like right now, I'm presenting to you, my laptop is facing me, and I've got my notes up if I need them, right? So I can use them as points. So I know what the slide that is coming up, obviously, in presentation mode. I think Matt does it awesomely. PC does too, but I'm just looking at the two. And I'll use them as that. And again, in building the presentation and rehearsing it, I'll end up going back and changing what the bullet said. By the way, it's not an absolute. If you have to read the point and there's no way around it, then you do it. It's okay, but just don't make it a habit, because then it overarches that. So hopefully that answers that question.
All right, our next one, on the one font slide, the question is, isn't there more than one font and not just the logos?
The logos and images are going to be differently. If you set up a template, it'll do it for headings and the body itself. Again, I try to stay with that one font, again, unless I'm making a point. And again, it's not an absolute, but I've seen so many presentations where it's got Times Roman, Helvetica. They're not even close. And it distracts from the message. And again, it's what you're comfortable with. I'm just providing you some guidelines that I've learned over years. I actually went to school, or went to training, excuse me, for effective presentation and training. So again, it's what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable with bullets, then use them. Again, it's where you need to be effective. But good question.
All right, our next one asks if your suggestions are only for board and senior management, or should they also be applied to any presentation, regardless of their level?
Excellent. Yes, and yes, and yes. The presentation here, the presentation I do for my board are always the same. I know who my audience is going to be. I know what my message is going to be. I still build it out. So any of my previous and future presentations are always going to follow these guidelines, and I break them myself. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, the next attendee says you use some great images in your presentation. Where did you find them all? Did you just start Googling the meaning, or is there one or two places you go to?
Excellent. I use Dr. Google. extensively. And then what I'm looking for usually is a PNG file. It'll have a transparent background. I do a lot of Photoshop work so that I can take my images into Photoshop and utilize them as well. So for example, the thank you, as you see here, is a little pixelated, but I couldn't find it any better other than doing it myself. Our challenges in images is a lot of them will have a watermark to pay for them, right? You got to buy those, but if you click view similar and start to refine your search, you'll find them. So it absolutely is, it's basically Google. If you have a media department in your organization and you're that fortunate, use them.
All right, when you're in a team presentation, if one of the presenters states something incorrectly, do you have any suggestions on how you might correct them or add to what they say to help make it accurate?
Oh, that's a politically charged question. First of all, I would never.
Listening to a conference.
I'm sorry? Oh. It's a politically charged question. Do I want to be General Custer on this one? Do I let it go? Does it change the rest of the presentation? It really is going to depend on the situation. That's a really hard one. And I've done team presentations with my own organization. I may refine it, or I may just let it go. Again, it really depends on where we are in the deal or the deck.
All right, this next one says when.
Go ahead.
On this next one, when training, and I have to, back it up a little bit here to get from the beginning. When training, how do you address people who are on their laptops or phones or to re-engage their attention? Training all the managers in my department, this person says, they have a terrible habit of tuning out, and being a level lower, addressing this is a bit sensitive.
Okay, so what I'll do is usually say at the beginning of the presentation, I've got a lot of material. I'll kind of make note of it. I'd appreciate it if you could silence, put your phone down, and close your laptops so that I'm able to provide a more effective presentation. I'm putting it on me. I'm able to provide a more effective presentation that will resound with you. I put it on me. I didn't tell you to do it. I've asked gently and nicely. So you can make that your own words. But that's a challenge. I did a presentation in the Pacific Rim, and I didn't see any eyes, and I thought it was my presentation. I learned that that's a cultural piece. So again, it's what's my level of acceptance threshold of pain.
Okay, our next one. How do you make all of your points without bullets? Any hints, tips?
Yes. So let's go back, right? I'm going to go back in here. I just turn the bullet point off here, and what I do is I'll cheat as well. I'll open that up because that bullet takes about a full font letter away. So, for example, if I have the audience is here for a reason, it won't fit. So again, it's a style thing. I've actually gone through some of my older stuff, and if I'm reusing it or rebuilding it, and I take it away. Sometimes, again, I'll leave it in. It's a comfort level.
All right, and could you please repeat the name of the site where you get your slides?
They'll be available through ACP, correct, Jim?
No, I mean I think they mean the ones that you use in your PowerPoint.
Again, I'll hand this out. These are actually hyperlinks as well. But the big ones at Department of Homeland Security, and they've changed, like Seth hasn't done a lot, but Guy has done quite a bit, so there's a lot more out there. But again, you just send me an email, I'll send you the deck, and I'll expose the hyperlinks as well. The images, but the images themselves, if you look at the number of images, there's probably about 100 images here. I don't keep track of where I get them. I usually take them, I'll edit them, clean them up, and I just throw them in. That's the difficult one. If you have a specific one, shoot me an email, and I'd be more than happy to see if I can remember where I got it from.
All right, next question asks, do you share your notes and talk track with the audience after the presentations? And if not, how do you ensure that they have all the information that you verbally shared?
Great question. First of all, they get recorded like this, which does it. I've stopped, depending on the presentation, there'll be sporadic notes that are in there. So if they want the slide views, I'll give them with the notes. But more often it's this type of effect where, you know, having that benefit of being a member of ACP, you have access to it at any time on demand. And again, the slides are there as well. So again, the more you do the presentations and present, the less you'll use your notes as you go.
Okay, our next one asks what is the best way to gain interaction or awareness if you feel the room is dead? Do you recommend calling someone out with a question to help gain some traction?
Calling somebody out by individual can be deadly, especially if they're not paying attention. So I'll stop and say, so I have a question for you in the audience. So I'm now telling them to pay attention. Let me ask you, you know, in doing a presentation, and I'll look over in this direction, but I won't ask anybody. Does anybody here think that the colors are too bad or the background makes a difference? Right? So but I've got to be prepared. And it may be over here, go, great. Does anybody else want to comment? And then move on. So again, it goes back to engaging the audience. When I present, I take questions as they come, but that again comes with time and practice and failure, where you're now sweating on the stage because somebody's dominating it, you don't know how to get it back. It's like being a comedian, right? The heckler. So that's good. That's a good one. Hopefully that helps.
There's a little curiosity as to why you object to the use of bullet points.
For me, it's just keeping the slides cleaner. There seems to be a trend in professional presenters. There's another one, bullet points are for kittens. There's a couple of, you know, if you actually look out there. So again, it's all a personal preference. I'm presenting, I want my material to look a little differently as well. And again, if I'm using a large font, I want as much of that screen as I can use. So that's why, and again, you notice I don't have a lot of sub-bullets. I'll use those as talking points. In my title of my drafts, I'll use them because I can talk and present or practice it. But then I go back and I'll remove them because they become talking points. One of the slides we talked about eye, right? I had you guys immediately went to that visualization of the eye, because I mentioned that and you remember that. But I had in there talking about it instills confidence. I took it out because I knew what I wanted to do in my rehearsal. So again, bullet points, again, it's personal. Everybody wants to feel comfortable in their presentation. And I thought the bullets for the NRA was a cute one.
All right, how do you keep your audience engaged during a web or a screen share session?
Oh, these are the hardest. I will tell you that right now. And that's one of the things is changing it up is if I'm presenting, I wanted you to see me. And it's why? Because talking to a webcam or a speaker is very difficult. There's no way around it. You know, people are on email, they're on Facebook while you're doing this. You don't know, and again, that's where the rehearsal, and you've got to be comfortable in that. Normally, I find when I do a webinar, I'm actually talking faster because I don't have anybody in the room. So believe it or not, in my office today, I have an audience to use for again, not that I need an anchor, but it's going to keep my pace where it is because I'm using them as engagement. But webinars are the hardest. When ACP asked me to do this, I'd done this for them in person in the national. My marketing team did a great, media communications team did an awesome job of setting it up this way so that I could do it. Because otherwise, sitting at my desk is difficult.
Well, here's a good one. How do you keep track if the audience asks questions as you're going along? This person says he or she tends to lose the trail of thought with all the interruptions from the audience.
So two things. On the podium or near the podium, I have my phone with a timer. So I'm watching the clock. I'm not doing it now because I know how long this takes. But what I'll do is, hey, that's great. I'll kind of bring it back in by saying, you know, can we table that, or can you talk to me afterwards about it? Because I know where I'm at with my deck. I can see my PowerPoint. I know what my next slide is, and I need to bring it back in. Sometimes it's graceful. Sometimes it's not so graceful. But, you know, you know what? In the interest of respecting your time, can we hold questions to the end? Because I'd like to finish the presentation, and I know it's great, but please write them down, or let's hold them to the end. So again, taking that control back, recognizing what they want, and it is important. I'm looking at somebody right now. Makes that sense. And again, notice my hand gesture. I'm going like this. I'm being open. I'm recognizing that person. They're actually smiling at me. So it shows that we're good. And if they're not smiling, I'm just going to keep going anyway. But again, use your time allocated. Always recognize the question, and then decide whether you need to answer it or defer it. And then just say, hey, it's a lot of questions. This is great. I'm excited about that. But we need to get through this presentation. Let's hold them to the end.
All right. If anyone else still with us has a question, you know, please get it in now here in the next minute or so. If we don't get a chance to air it here before we wrap things up, Chris will get the question, and he'll be happy, I'm sure, to send you the answer. Our last remark that we've gotten in is from the previous questioner, who thanks you very much for all the great advice. And Chris, I want to thank you today for a really terrific presentation. And not only, I think, as you know, you suggested, it helps in the boardroom, but it helps in any time you're standing in front of people. You know, a lot of us know the intimidation we feel sometimes when there's an awful lot of eyeballs looking back at you, but there is a way to come through it.
Excellent.
So again, thank you so much for that.
So thank you again. And by the way, not that I'm promoting, but our Strategic BCP has a YouTube channel, and a lot of my presentations are up there. You'll see them in a very similar vein, and you'll see, oh, he said no bullets, and there's bullets. So this is the first one we've done with this type. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming. I enjoy it, and hopefully, and again, if you have any questions or I can help in anything, please, there's my email. I'd be more than happy to help. So thank you again.
Well, Chris, again, thank you. It was a great almost an hour, 50-some minutes. Thank you so much, and let me also thank everyone who attended here today. As ACP members know, these presentations will be put on the ACP website, and all you need to do is log in and go to our webinar archive, and you'll be able to watch this again. And those who have requested the slide decks, we'll have them emailed to them, and anyone else who needs it, you see Chris's email right there. I'd like to just remind everybody to continue to watch the ACP website for future webinar information. And finally, a very brief survey about this webinar will pop up when you close your browser, so we ask you please take a half a minute to answer the questions. It really does help us refine our productions for you. So with that all being said, thanks again to everyone who joined, and to Chris for his great presentation, and we thank you for being with us. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
See you later.